Hello, everyone. How the heck are you doing this morning?
I am kind of tired, and I don't know what we just saw.
I'm super tired. I guess I'm a little less annoyed than everybody else is. Everybody seems like really, really upset. They're like, oh, a Q&A. There was no questions. They never marketed this as a Q&A. So I'm not like nearly as mad as everybody else. Plus, like, we have so much to talk about with all the interviews that have taken place in the past 2 or 3 days. So we have plenty to talk about.
I don't think people realize that there was a lot of stuff in the interviews that just sort of slipped in. Like, there was a lot of class changes that Blizzard never described in any of the presentations, which I found a little weird, but, you know, if you care about hunters or warlocks, there's some interesting information that we haven't discussed in the show yet.
Yeah.
So,
and we did get
we're
some
awake. We should do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and we did get some clarification, even though there weren't a ton of questions in the dev talk this morning. We did get some clarification on some things that I think a lot of people were asking about. So I'm not mad about it. What do you want to talk about first, Perk?
Let's just go through the live blog quickly, then we can fill in with the interviews.
Sure.
So, okay. So I guess the first thing is that there were some rumors that there's going to be the movie being shown.
I don't know where
Q&A.
people got that, though, because what happened was Warcraft tweeted out, they're like, oh, for a piece of the movie, make sure you watch the live stream, and I definitely immediately interpreted that as a prop because they did the same thing for San Diego's Comic-Con. I've entered 4 times already. Is that allowed?
I know.
Is that within
I'm not
the
sure.
rules?
But yeah, I need to get Warglaives and enter into them too. That is super cute.
Yeah, I just want all the things. It'd just be so cool to have a piece of the movie like that. So if you are interested in winning a Warcraft movie prop, all you have to do is tweet a picture of you in your battle stance with hashtag Warcraft movie, hashtag BlizzGC 2015. And I'm not really sure how they're choosing. It's probably just random. So, but yeah.
Yeah. So we can talk about the lore a little bit. So I guess it's good to know that we are, like, they said that we're in current Azeroth,
yes.
As opposed to alternate Azeroth.
Yeah.
And that's something we weren't clear about on Thursday, so I guess that was good to go over.
I thought using the term current Azeroth to describe it was actually, I mean, they went into it further, but as soon as he said current Azeroth, I'm like, well, currently we're in alternate Azeroth, so that's not helpful.
Yeah. They wouldn't say if Illidan was a bad or a good guy right now, and
he's just pissed.
Yeah, we're asking for his help, so maybe he'll come through.
He's like a goodish bad guy.
Yeah. Something that, what was I going to say? Oh, that's someplace else. Oh, yeah, so Dalaran and the new zones, I think it's just interesting to note that, like, Dalaran is going to be in the Broken Isles, and there's going to be some changes to the underbelly, but it's also going to be physically in Northrend, so if you're like level 70 and you're leveling, you're still going to have Dalaran there. And
well, it makes me wonder, the way that he described it is he was like, oh, well, it's technically coming with us, but it'll be there if you're leveling. So it almost makes me wonder if you go back to Northrend as a level 100, 105, 110, will it be there? Or is it like a phase thing where once you see the new Dalaran that is in the Broken Isles, does the old one disappear at Northrend? Because that would be the storyline? The storyline? You know what I mean?
And I think some people were surprised being like, oh, wait, so an expansion is a frozen point in time, so, if we go to Northrend, are we going 5 years back all the time?
Yeah.
So, it seemed to be a minor point, but I guess that was good to clarify that how Dalaran is actually going to work. And I'm also interested in what's happening to the underbelly, because there's been some talk that they're considering the underbelly as the rogue class area, which I'm kind of confused about, but I'm curious how this is going to get changes, because I would like the rogue area to be in Ravenholm.
Yeah, everybody does. Yeah. Everybody does. Although, I have weird feelings about the whole thing, because as a shaman, I'm being banished to some cave somewhere, so I don't want to hear it. You get to be in Dalaran at least.
Yeah, but it's like smelly water and...
The Dalaran sewers has the Ninja Turtles in it.
I guess that's true.
Yeah, it does. And it's all like conveniently located. I have to go into some stupid cave.
So another thing they talked about, touched on, which was explained in some other interviews, but not in the big presentation, was how flying was going to work. And basically they confirmed that they liked how Warlords was good in the way flying was introduced. And, everything's subject to change, but in 7.0, you can start working towards getting flying in Legion, which means no flying at launch, basically.
Yeah.
Of course, that's subject to change, but it seems we're doing another Draenor Pathfinder type system.
Absolutely. Yeah, it sounded like it was going to be Legion Pathfinder, which I'm fine with because I think that's a definite good way to handle it personally. They also talked a little bit about artifacts, and this was surprising to me because a big question has been with artifact weapons, you know, since these are going to be the only weapon, like drops. I mean, they're not really drops, but since they're going to be the only weapons in the new expansion, like how is it going to work for dual spec? Because particularly Warlords of Draenor was very big on, oh, you can just respec, your gear changes with you, like everything is so convenient. Yeah. And now it's like, oh, well, you actually have to get a whole second weapon or third weapon, depending on how many specs you have.
Yeah, so it was nice to hear that they were planning some catch-up mechanisms in mind. The one thing that isn't getting a catch-up mechanism, which we didn't hear in the Thursday presentation, but they alluded to in some interviews, was relics. And basically, artifacts now have two paths, and you've got the weapon talents, which are like traits. And we saw that in the presentation where you basically put your artifact power into unlocking different things it does. But then you can actually modify and upgrade the stats like weapon damage, and you do that via things called relics, and those sort of take the place and excitement of getting a weapon drop. And you get those with things like, you know, raids and dungeons, and some things like Mythic might have better relics available.
What worries me about this, though, is as someone, like, I would say that I play Resto 80% of the time, and I play Elemental 20% of the time. So it would be more worth it for me to funnel all of my artifact power and all of my relics into a Resto weapon, but that's going to make me pretty null and void if my guild does need me as Elemental. So I kind of dislike that on a personal level. I mean, I know we're not here to talk about our feelings, but gosh darn it, I'm talking about my feelings, and it's like a little bit crappy because if you really truly are not dual spec and you main but then you fill in sometimes, like it's not really worth it for you to spend half your artifact power that you've earned and half your relics on your off spec that you only use 1 out of 5 raid nights.
Yeah, one thing that I was concerned about was the complexity of adhering this, because it seemed that they wanted to simplify weapons. You know, you're not meant to obsess over which weapon from which boss is slightly better, and then you can unlock all the traits, so there's no weird min-maxy, well, I need 2 points here and 10 points here type thing. And the relics right now, they're adding a level of complexity back in, and I don't want people being like, well, you need to put your 10 relics towards DPS and like 3 relics towards agility, and 1 relic towards this, and I think that could get even more complex than saying, do I pick weapon A or B from Hellfire Citadel?
Well, I also worry about like the burnout factor of that too, because it's gonna hurt guilds that have people like, specifically like Boomkins, Elemental Shamans, Shadow Priests, the type of classes that frequently are asked to heal as well. And if your artifact weapon is so greatly influenced by your artifact power and your relics, you're kind of going to be at a real loss if you don't put equal time into both playing a class like that. And that effectively means you have to do twice what a rogue has to do, or twice what a demon hunter has to do, or twice what a warlock has to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess they don't have the catch-up mechanism spelled out yet, but it would have been nice if they could have given an example, because I think a lot of people are really concerned. They didn't mention in one of the interviews that they understand that people respec even for something like, you know, the middle of a dungeon if they need to, and they don't want you to feel like you're totally locked into something because you didn't do this big.
Yeah, and I know that artifacts aren't legendaries, but just for the sake of comparison, legendary rings, you do the quest, you do everything you need to do, and then if you have an off-spec, you can just pay for your off-spec ring.
They could do something similar.
That would be a better option in my opinion, but I'm not a game designer. What do I know?
In
profession news.
So I really want to hear a lot more about professions.
Me too.
But they said that they have more designers on professions specifically now, and we're getting new quest lines for each profession, and like profession, prestige, and expertise, individual recipes, and some UI changes.
I'm so excited.
The quest lines seem exciting. I don't know, it sort of reminds me of how artifacts get their own little quest line. You're meant to feel like you're part of your class, and maybe you'll have more.
Well, not only that, but this just goes back again to people saying, well, there was nothing to do in Warlords of Draenor, especially if you aren't raiding, like what was I supposed to do? And they've added all of these things, like, you know, you're going to have your artifact quests, and you're going to have your profession mission quests, and you're going to have all of these things to gain artifact power, and you're just going to have all of these reasons to get out in the world. And when you're not necessarily out in the world, you're going to have your class hub, which is going to be a super great place to, like, you know, learn more and share ideas and kind of, like, make friends in that way. And you're going to have Dalaran, which was arguably one of the most social cities in the history of World of Warcraft. So I'm really looking forward to that. But as someone who was very much against the way that professions worked in Warlords of Draenor with garrisons, I am very happy to hear that there's going to be professions and progression, and I don't know, it just sounds fun and interesting, and I don't feel like professions have been fun and interesting for a pretty significant amount of time. Now, also, I see you're doing stuff, so I'll just keep going on the train. They also talked a bit about...
I am good again. Apparently, your cursor was in front of my face.
I fixed it like a while ago. It's kind of a long story. I fixed it a while ago, though.
Okay.
I'm on it,
getting
guys.
those messages, and I'm like, okay, we're fine. So, I am back. We could talk about Demon Hunters.
Much less of a big deal than people are making it out to be. But they did talk a little bit more about Demon Hunters, although truthfully we didn't get much new information than we did in the initial presentation. They did confirm that we would be getting a 12th character slot, which this horrible cynical part of me doesn't understand why that was a big deal with Connected Realms. I mean, you essentially right now have 22 character slots per server, but I guess I'm glad for the people who really wanted that.
Yeah, I mean, I think just people are just happy to know it exists. And maybe if you're a new player, if you're an old player coming back before things like Connected Realms, you don't know about that.
Yeah.
And, you know, so
it should be that way.
They confirmed something.
Yeah, it should be that way anyways. And they did talk a little bit about Burning Crusade, which was interesting, hearing that they had considered Demon Hunters as a new class in Burning Crusade and then decided against it. So it's crazy that this is something that's been kind of potentially in development and toyed with for, 5 years?
Even more than that, because I think Wrath was 5 years. You know, Burning Crusade, that was...
Yeah, like 8 years ago, yeah.
I mean, there are definitely parallels with how they've talked about the Death Knight starting area being the inspiration for the Demon Hunter starting area. So they, maybe they were doing some prototype Demon Hunter things 8 years ago and that influenced Death Knights. I also thought that one thing, which I wish, again, they could have gone into more, that's sort of the theme of this, I don't want to call it a Q&A, but presentation that we had.
They called it a dev talk or a dev chat. Yeah. It seemed to me like it was a recap of Gamescom, like Blizzard at Gamescom, and then just a couple extra sneak bits of information. And I would guess that they were things that they were getting overwhelmed with tweets and stuff like that about the character slot and stuff like that.
Yeah, so they were saying that how is a Demon Hunter different than a Death Knight and a Monk, and how do you...
This was sort of a silly question.
Yeah. I mean, I wish they could have gone into... sort of, survival hunters and demon hunters are melee. Is that, too much melee crowding, too many melee classes? But they didn't get into that. They basically just said that they felt that a demon hunter was, a Death Knight was meant to be armored and slow, and a monk was more hybridized with some healing lore, and a Death Knight was primarily agile. And... yeah, I guess that's what they...
Yeah, I don't think we should really expect to hear too much about specifics with class changes or PvP until the beta's out. I mean, it's just the way it is, and they also do need to save something for BlizzCon.
Yeah, that is true. I think they just said a few class things in interviews, so I was expecting at least that to get repeated in this presentation. But yeah, we can talk about the interviews somewhat.
Yeah, Wowhead has a whole recap of all of the interviews that have taken place, because a bunch of EU fan sites who were at Gamescom got to do press interviews and stuff like that, so they got a ton of information that we didn't get from other places. And we thought now would be a really great time to talk about that, since people thought they were going to get this in the dev chat we just saw, but don't worry, Perk and I are here to save the day. Let's talk a little bit about the Blizz Planet interview first, just because it's in order. Now, I need to get this out of the way right now, because this was something that I heard from the Blizz Planet interview that was very exciting to me. I actually tweeted the guy who runs Blizz Planet. I was like, can you please ask about the Moose Torrents? Please, can you ask about them? And Ian Hazacostas said that anything that you saw as far as Demon Hunters and customization goes will be available, and that it is within the realm of consideration for players to be able to have Moose Torrents, so the hope is real. Yeah. I just want to be a Moose Torrent. Stop judging me, Perk. And we know, you play Alliance, you like Night Elves, I like cows.
Yeah, I don't know. Just the moose ears feel very heavy.
So
I don't
great.
Know.
Have you seen Torn Run, though? They're like, dirt,
yeah.
dirt. So it's like perfect.
I love how Flask Guitar in the PTR is always some sort of, like, Tauren that's a rogue or a mage or something. It can't be.
It's something ridiculous.
But yeah, so going for the start of it, they clarified that the Legion will be introduced to players in an event that takes place before the expansion launches, and confirmed that the flying PvP mercenary patch is the last thing that wraps up Warlords content, and because people have been referring to Ruby Sanctum as being a bridge patch that maybe was effective in Wrath, they addressed that and said that, Halion was cool and entertaining, but he was sort of good for about a week, and if you had been clearing Ice Crown, his loot his loot was redundant, and if you weren't clearing Ice Crown, he was too hard, and you wanted the Ice Crown loot anyway.
It's funny that was the example that they used, because in my mind, I thought Ordos was like a pretty good bridge between expansions, because it like utilized the legendary cloak, and it had all this cool new Warforged gear. So that was a little disappointing to hear that there wasn't going to be something like a world boss or a mini raid or something. But it's also kind of exciting, because if they're saying, we're just going to have like the flying mercenary mode patch, and then the next patch after that is going to be your, when we had the big
actual event.
Yeah, like a big event
cool.
that will lead to the expansion. That should be a lot of fun. Those are always really fun. And you always
if I had to choose between like a raid and an event, I think that having a full-blown event is better, because that just reaches more players, and if you're not max level, you can participate in it. Like, I remember the scenario leading up to Mists of Pandaria, that was essentially the pre-expansion event, and not a lot of people got to do it.
Yeah.
And it didn't really feel like an event. But I think having something in the outdoor world will be better. I mean, of course, I would love if there was like a boss that you fought in addition to the outside world. But.
Yeah, plus sometimes you get really cool stuff like that troll costume. Well, I guess it was Gnome if you were Alliance. From a couple years ago. Factions. Yeah, like I think those types of items are really cool, and like in the future you can be like, oh look, I was like playing when this was a thing, and you can't get this anymore in your face. So I hope they do something like that. But I always like those events. Plus, if they add a raid right before the new expansion, it's pretty pointless, because all of that gear is useless. Like there's, it gets so close to being irrelevant.
Yeah, it's like, oh, why do I need this? And other people will say, oh, I didn't get to clear everything before the new expansion. I'm sad now.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, so...
Ooh, excuse me.
They also...
You go.
Oh, okay. Oh, so they were saying that the going back to more story stuff, they said they didn't like the problem with Warlord's story was that there was a bunch of lore that went into it, and, throwbacks to everything, but it wasn't readily apparent in the game, and they tried that with Garrison campaigns to make it more obvious, but it just wasn't really... It wasn't good enough, it wasn't effective. So yeah.
I also like that they talked a little bit more about the social interaction improvements, because that was something that was advertised kind of on the box art of Legion, and we didn't really know what it meant. And it was talked about that it's going to be similar to like when one of your BattleNet friends joins up for an LFR or a dungeon, it'll prompt you like, hey, do you want to do this if you're not doing anything else? Which I think is really cool, because that's not something that people often will be like, hey, I'm doing an LFR, friends. Does anybody want to go? But there are a lot of times when maybe you're not doing anything, you would go. And once again, this is just another way that Blizzard is trying to encourage people to get out and do stuff.
Yeah, also they were talking about if you queue up for something, you'll have like a prompt just sent to other people
Yeah.
like inviting them to do it. So, I mean, that sort of reminds me of Twitter. If you're like, hey, guys, I'm going to do this now. I need one more person for this. That sort of has that same functionality. I mean, I would love to be able to turn it off, so when I'm logging on to do something for work, it's not like, hey, everyone, Perk's queuing up for this to do work.
Like, yeah, no, I'm sure that's something you'll be able to turn off, or at least at very minimum select who you want it to send things to. But, there wasn't much more in that interview. We also had, right? Is there anything else you want to talk about? Did you want to talk about the Warlocks?
I want to talk a little bit about the artifacts and the legendary thing. So, the interview talked about the relic slots, but we already know what they are now. But something that they were talking about was, like, what's the difference when people are talking about an artifact versus an actual legendary in the data versus something that's legendary in field? Because there's been a lot of confusion about that.
Yeah.
And they confirmed that you can transmog artifacts but that doesn't mean that you can go back and transmog an old legendary like Warglaives.
I think that's why they're being really careful about the wording of that. Like, when people were asking, like, oh, will artifacts turn into legendaries? And some people were like, oh, yeah, they're kind of just like legendaries. And other people were like, no, definitely not legendaries. And I think it's because just of wording things like that, if, you know, one is transmoggable and one is not, they don't want to bring up problems there.
But the really cool thing was that they said Blizzard was saying that, you know, perhaps in the future, some old legendaries could become transmoggable.
Oh.
Like the limited time things like the Miss Pandaria cape, but not old farmable things that you can grab right now like
like the bow or something, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm wondering how that's going to work because the only other limited time thing we have is the ring, and you can't transmog that anyway.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was cool how they might be changing or relaxing their stance.
No, if they're going to let you transmog one legendary, they need to let you transmog all legendaries. Like, then they should just take them out of the game. They should give you, like, a one patch warning. You've had years and years to get them. Like, if it wasn't important to you, then, like, I don't know. That's how I think they should handle that.
Yeah. Two more things. They gave examples of the class hall area, and they said that the rogue class area might be the Dalaran sewers. I'm a rogue. I like Ravenholt as a better area because you've got the lockboxes there. You have some class quests that used to send you there.
Yeah.
You actually have rogue NPCs there. Like, you've got their house. You can buy, like, a rogue cooking recipe in the basement. So I am pro Ravenholt. And they also try to give a few more examples of why the champion in your class hall is not a follower, that they try to enhance your experience instead of just doing things for you. And I think they really need to keep emphasizing this because people are going to think that the garrison, this is like Garrisons 2.0, and I think they need to be like, no, the champion is going to, you assign them to patrol the zone, and then when you show up to the zone, you'll get, you know, more rewards or a combat bonus. That's how it's going to work. It's not going to be the champion, like, goes out to the zone and then comes back with experience.
Yeah, it brings back your raid box.
Yep, exactly.
Hey, I did this for you. Have some gear.
My item level is higher than yours too, by the way.
Oh, that's not my life right now, thankfully, but it could be.
It was for a while. Like, I remember being 100, it was, that was interesting.
They also talked a little bit about Warlocks, and I'm not sure what the context of this was, but they did specify that in Legion, Affliction will be very dot-based, and that Destruction will be bursty damage, and that Demonology will, for lack of better words, be the Beastmaster of Warlocks. So they must be bringing back the spec that they destroyed.
Yeah, I mean, that's in the context that Metamorphosis is going away from Demonology Warlocks and, you know, because Demon Hunters
have Metamorphosis.
So, well, the roles are being changed up. What's the fantasy for each Warlock spec now?
Oh, that's kind of cool, though.
Yeah.
Like, I like it.
And they're like, you know, like Demonology used to be able to summon demons, and then when they changed all the talents, they became demons, and they actually used the talent to sacrifice demons.
Yeah.
So their lore was getting a little murky there.
A little weird things were happening. Do you want to move on to buff.de?
Yeah, I think we could do that. Yeah, so they have covered some of Demon Hunter and Artifact topics that Blizz Planet did. I mean, it's still good to get confirmation that the interviews are saying the same things. But they raised the concern that with Demon Hunters, we're going to have 4 classes that were leather, while 2 classes were male. And they were trying to talk about how, from a fantasy standpoint, it feels right to be leather. You know, when you think Illidan, you think leather, you know, melee sort of in your face. But also in gameplay terms, they don't think it will be a huge issue because if you're doing group contra like Raid Finder, people use personal loot. And if you're using group loot, that's sort of in an established raid group playing together. And if you're in a raid, you have things like set pieces that not all leather users use. You have things like rings, which a lot of people want to use.
Yeah.
And the remaining slots that might have issues are just bracers, belt, and boots, but that's not... You know, that's a lot smaller than, oh my god, all of my leather loot is being, you know, under fire with so many people.
Yeah, so. I think it's weird. I definitely thought that when we got a new class that we would get a male-wearing class just because of the imbalance there, and I also thought a new class would use a bow, but I should stop saying things because whatever I say will not happen.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to think of what classes would fit the fantasy of being male, because I actually don't have any classes that use mail, and with cloth, I think caster, and with leather, I sort of think like, assassin or in your face, or with plate, I think, tank and heavily protected, but I just sort of have a hard time coming up with a class that I think fits into a male concept, I guess.
Yeah, they could have done something similar to, like, in my mind, I'm thinking of someone like Tyrande in Heroes of the Storm, that's, like, a bow user and can maybe do, like, sort of utility and support and maybe heals, but also do damage. Like, something in between a hunter and a shaman.
Yeah, it's just tricky, Like,
an elemental hunter. Yeah, I agree. Someone in chat said bards could have used male. I agree. Like a bard or a cleric could have used male. An engineer wouldn't really fit into World of Warcraft's lore because they're also, that's a profession. Could you imagine being like an engineer that engineered? Hey, yo, dog.
Cool.
Yo, dog, we heard you like engineers, so we gave your engineers engineering.
If demon hunters can only be night elves or blood elves, engineers could only be
goblins and gnomes.
And they'd all have Hearthstone boards in their starting zone.
So amazing. We're on to something here. We are on to something here. They also...
I thought...
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No.
I thought the weapon stuff was kind of interesting. They said that they wanted to have priest weapons that were much cooler than Benediction, but they wouldn't share details now. So I was sad. I also really like it. I really like getting Benediction on my alt priest. It was a challenge, even though I did it a little bit later. It felt like I accomplished something. The quest line was cool, so I wonder what's cooler than Benediction. And we knew that the demon hunters are wearing glaives, but if you look at the slides of the character creation screen, you can actually see some of the actual artifacts. They confirmed that it wasn't just a placeholder or your starter weapon, that these were some of the artifacts. And it was super cool. Like, there was one that was just a glaive that was on fire. That was awesome.
Fiery glaives.
Yeah, it was like the Ashbringer
variant,
are they
using two glaives, or are they using one glaive? Because I feel like I've heard both of those things. Do you know?
I'm not sure. I feel that I'm waiting for the official website for more clarification, because the official website just lists all the available weapons that other
How would you attack someone with one glaive? Like, that would just be so, like, would you spin it, or would you, like...
Yeah, I mean, also, like, Illidan has two glaives.
Yeah, it's a dual
Actually,
wield.
I think in the presentation, they were showing
I thought they showed two glaives, too, but then someone told me it was only one. Maybe it depends on the spec. That's a good point. Maybe it's spec-based. Maybe they use, like, a shield and a glaive. That's so weird.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, looking at the ones in the trailer, I just pulled them up, and they've got them turned to the side, and you can see one weapon really big, and then in the back you can kind of see another weapon in the shadows. So, I mean, we'll see more soon. Also with the character selection screen, who knows, maybe there was some weird bug and they only showed one, not two.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I would just like the website to be updated, because I'm like, well, can they actually use swords? Like, could they actually equip a sword? Like, could the warglaives drop that are one-handed swords, and could they actually equip them if you went back and did that content? Or can they only have glaives?
That would really suck for Transmog reasons. Like, because, like, if they're only going to be able to use glaives, that would completely limit them to nothing. They would have nothing to choose from, because...
I mean... Yeah, maybe that would be in sort of like the staves and axe and mace bucket, but that's been a concern about people in general. Someone saying, well, my fire mage, like, her personality is this staff, and I got it in Ulduar, and it's awesome, and now my thing is going to be this dagger. Like, that's not my silhouette, that's not my... I can't use my favorite weapon anymore. Like, what do I do?
Yeah, I feel the same way as a trash shaman who frequently uses staff.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, I have a lot of transmogs built around, like, specific weapons that I like, so I know I'm going to end up having a one-hander and a shield, because that's what I should have, but... Like, what's going to happen in that situation? Like, am I going to get an artifact shield, or am I going to get an artifact weapon? If there's no weapon drops, like, am I going to get both? If there's no weapon drops, are there shield drops? Like, what the heck is going on? Is everybody just going to have two-handers? I don't understand, no comprende. And why wouldn't they make the mage thing a wand? Just saying. Like, we
don't know Arcane yet. Maybe Arcane is
be cool.
Wand.
They should
we've got a staff,
utilize
a dagger,
wands more.
Yeah. Brief derailment from the interview to say that I just was checking Twitter, and people have been saying, oh, why was this a Q&A? It wasn't a Q&A. And Ian Hazakostas just replied saying, sorry you felt that way. We probably should have promoted it differently, but it was more of a Gamescom recap with some new information. Where was the promise made? Because we did a terrible job of setting expectations. So,
yeah, I don't know, though, because I definitely, if you go back and look at the language, it's called a dev chat.
I think the issue was on Sunday, they're like, oh, we'll be back answering as many questions as we can. And the graphic used for the chat was not a bunch of people sort of sitting on the couch talking. It was people on a stage in front of some sort of like presentation going on. It looked very BlizzCon
very
style.
BlizzCon-y.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, yep, we can go back to talking about the interview now.
We can't.
I just saw that. No, we can't. We're going to have to talk about why we didn't get more questions.
Gosh dang it, Ian, and we want to fly.
And I wanted to write more things this morning at 8 a.m.
I know, I want to go back to bed. I don't know. And they did a little more talking about just how classes in general will have more focus in the next expansion with the class halls, and also that the class changes should be emphasizing fantasy and identity. So your spec will be very singular to itself. It's not going to be like, there'll be a very definitive difference between a survival hunter, a marksman hunter, and a beast mastery hunter, which is fun. Did they touch on anything else that was different from other interviews?
They talked a bit about discipline priests and how priests are the only class with 2 healing spells. No, healing specs. Wait, rogues probably have 2 between recoup and like their glyph. Anyway, so they're saying that they're trying to make those specs more different because with the fantasy of each spec having to be different, like it just wasn't, priests needed some changes. So discipline priests, they're focusing on being more of an offensive style healer, and they want to do another spin on the atonement mechanic, and they'll still have heals and power word shield, but they'll sustain healing through DPS, and they are trying to explain how atonement would change. So like in the past, with atonement you would spam smite and holy fire, and healing was smart, but in Legion it's more like you throw out single target heals, and then those players get a buff, and the next time you smite they get healing, and you have to keep refreshing buffs and making active decisions as you go. And they hope that it solves the absorb heavy nature of Discipline Priest, which right now it's not great, and they've talked a bunch before how absorbs take away healing fun from other specs.
Well, yeah, as like a resto shaman, if there is a holy paladin and a disc priest in my raid, I know I'm useful in my heart, but it takes away some of the fun of it because there's just not as much to heal, and it's not a competitive thing either. Do you know what's super disappointing from this interview, though, is that they asked about how demon hunters are getting tattoos, and the tattoos will be customizable in character creation, but no other classes are getting anything like that. Like, the tattoos are only for demon hunters, and it's kind of annoying knowing that they have the tech to add things like that. And you see, like, in Warlords of Draenor, you see, like, some of the orcs have tattoos, and it's a thing. Let us have the thing.
Something I'm concerned about, from sort of a joking standpoint, was how, so Night Elves all have tattoo markings, and, well, the female Night Elves do, and actually in-game, the female Night Elf Demon Hunter NPCs have markings as well. And the ones on the character creation screen have the tattoos on their body, but they don't have the facial tattoos. And I was going, oh, wow. It's weird to have a night elf with not wearing tattoos on their face. And I'm sure there's, lore reasons behind it or whatnot.
Or maybe it's just early and there's...
Yeah, it just feels weird for like my character can become a demon hunter and her face will look a bit different now. So I would like to see them, It's obviously, I'm not upset. I'm just half joking.
You're so upset.
Oh, wait,
calm down,
I'm so sad.
Calm down.
Another cool demon hunter thing they kind of talked about on the stream, on this interview a little bit, was how they only have 2 specs, and they decided not to give them an alternate DPS spec. And they're saying that they actually really like this model. If they can go back in time, they would... other classes with multiple DPS specs maybe would have fewer of them, and they talked about the challenge of rogues to make them all feel unique.
Freaking half of the classes in WoW are like 3 DPS specs. That's so awkward to say.
Yeah, like they're saying, especially they said that rogues are really difficult to differentiate between them right now. So, maybe if the rogue was just 1 spec, that would be better.
And maybe they'll do something fun to rogues.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Delete a spec! Deal with it.
Your spec just vanished. But yeah, they gave some examples of why demon hunters, like, what they were trying to do if they did do 2 specs and how it just didn't feel right. Like, you could have a ranged demon hunter spec, and it could be, more like a hunter, but it wouldn't feel like Illidan, for example.
No, it would have been awesome. Yeah. They could have done, like, a hunter with, like, a sort of disengage, but the disengage was like a backflip. They could have done cool
you could have
stuff.
had, like, demon pets, but I guess, demonology now has the demon pets. You could have had
demon pets. Oh, come on, Perk, you're killing me. You're just making me sad right now. And they could have made, like, they could have made all of the arrows, like, cursed arrows. Lots of mind controls. I'm just saying, it could have been a thing.
Yeah. But they decided they just wanted the one DPS spec, and they just stick all the cool ideas into one spec instead of having 2 specs that sort of share the same fantasy, just put it into one instead of watering it down more. So, that's their choice. And finally, one more cool thing from the interview was how they talked about, with Artifact Quest, they clarified that they're not meant to be as elaborate as things like Green Fire or the legendary quest line. It's something, like, an Artifact Quest is something you have to do early on, and it's meant to reinforce the fantasy and develop the storyline, and it's not meant to be a week-long elaborate thing.
No,
and if you don't get it done, you're blocked on getting the artifact.
Yeah, I got the idea that would be something you did right at level 100, because if you're saying you get that weapon, like, right at the start, I wouldn't expect it to be hard. I would expect it to be fun.
Yeah. So, that's about it with the interviews. Just something else which they didn't touch upon at all, which I'm very interested in knowing more about, is the new Transmog system. So
I know.
Yeah. Basically, on the little box art section, they talked about new features coming, and on the Thursday panel, they touched pretty much on all of them except for social features in Transmog. And we got more details on social features from Blizz Planet, but we didn't on Transmog, and the description on the site is just, we're improving the transmogrification system, allowing you to collect item appearances and save your favorite outfits without sacrificing precious bag space. So
bank space, void storage space, so many spaces. We talked about this with Ian Hezekostas, and it was really exciting to hear that it was on the front burner. I honestly wasn't expecting it to be on, like, the box art. You know what I mean? Like, to be such a prominent feature. But if any of you guys have ever played Diablo 3, it sounds like it's going to be similar to Diablo 3, where once an item drops for you, if it's something you can use for Transmog, it will be stored in, like, a hidden storage system, where when you go to your Transmog, every cloak that you've ever seen drop ever, the problem that I would assume they would have is that there are people who have deleted things, and I have a feeling that those, if it's not currently in your bags, in your bank, in your void storage right now, you're effed. But at least going forward, we'll be able to get
I'm also curious
everything.
about things like if things are account-wide or not. There's also some strange things where if you put an item in void storage and you preview it, and it's one of those items that can drop from normal, heroic, or mythic, the color might be incorrect, so there's a lot of annoying background tech there.
Yeah.
And like, how's account going to work if, for example, you loot like a staff on one class and it's going to show up in your rogue's UI and you just can't use it? Maybe we'll see more relaxed restrictions. Like common quality gear would be amazing to transfer.
Oh, I know. Or like all the holiday gear. I've been saying this forever. The Vile Fumigator's mask is one of the sickest items in the game.
Yeah.
It, like, with the backpack with, like, the green ooze and it bubbles all over the place. You have the big mask. It's so cool. Why can't I use it, Blizzard? Or bunny ears. Yeah. Just let me have the friggin' bunny ears on my Tauren. It's ridiculous and hilarious, and I want it. And don't tell me there's not ridiculous and hilarious things in game already, because you've seen a female panda in a pirate hat. Ridiculous.
Yeah. So I guess that's about it. I just found another thing that Ian was saying. Basically, before the Q&A started, he said something, and no one saw it, but he did say that the dev chat was moderated chat tackling some common questions, not a huge info dump. And it got one favorite, so no one saw this, but, the devs were coming into it thinking it was one type of chat, and it turned out to be a different type of, people thought it was something else, but, maybe people thought it was that way because for the Hearthstone stream, it was a little more serious. There was a new hero that was announced with Heroes of the Storm, the Medic. We got 5 Hearthstone cards, and for each card, they explained how it was useful a little bit.
Yeah.
So maybe between the super info-packed Thursday panel and then Friday, people thought that we were going to get more of the same thing, like a new reveal that we hadn't seen before. With Heroes, they talked about 3 heroes at the press event, and they released that on Wednesday, and then Friday we got something else. Maybe people figured, well, Thursday will be most of the stuff, but then on Sunday maybe we'll hear about professions or, see a picture of another dungeon or just get something new.
Yeah, I guess my feelings of the whole thing is that I assumed that we were getting, a 5-minute, this is the name of the expansion, here's a little teaser, Demon Hunters drop the mic, and that we would have gotten all the information we got on Thursday today. So I guess I'm just, it would be whatever the opposite of jaded is, that's what I'm not jaded.
Right.
I just feel like we got a lot more information than was expected, and I'm also happy that there are some things that we are going to get at BlizzCon, and whatever information we get at BlizzCon will be very, very close to beta. It's much more likely to be in the final cut of the game, so I'm pretty happy with the things we've heard thus far, and I'm also happy that there's still time for feedback. With the things that we've heard so far about maybe dual specs being a concern or, profession quests being a concern.
How does Transmog work?
How does Transmog work? How do these social features work? There's still lots of time for them to gather feedback on what people really want to hear about, what people are already asking for changes. So I feel like we're in a really good place right now, even if today was a little disappointing for some people. Nobody died.
Yeah,
it's gonna be okay.
When they first announced Warlords, they promised a lot of very cool sounding but vague things, and some of them did not make it into the game.
Yeah.
But in addition, when you demoed Warlords, it really felt incomplete. It was part of the Horde starting area, but it wasn't as atmospheric, and you could do part of Blood Maul Slag Mines, and I was not it was just. It didn't really fit together well. I was much more impressed with the Mist demo, and I'd rather have less information and less wild expectations than seeing something that gave me a bad first impression playing it, or to have them promise something and then realize that it couldn't take place. So I'm really happy that we got all that information on Thursday. And it's like you're saying, we thought that we were getting Thursday's presentation on Sunday, and that Thursday would just be a few short words and we'd all be, panicking and, hype train for the interim few days. So, I think that we got that sort of hour-long dump of information that we were expecting from Gamescom, and we got spoiled, and now we wanted 2 hours of information from Gamescom.
Yeah, I'm not upset about the whole situation. I think we still have a lot to learn when it comes to BlizzCon. It's just not far away, guys. It's so close. We're already in August. BlizzCon is September, October, November, 3 months away. 3 months away. I'm excited.
Yeah.
And
I am too.
I'm very nervous because I'm in a guild right now. We raid 3 days a week, and everybody's going to be a Demon Hunter, and I don't know how we're going to accomplish anything because our tanks are rerolling Demon Hunter, our healers are rerolling Demon Hunter, all of our melees are rerolling Demon Hunter.
Maybe if they want to make every spec more interesting, each spec will get something that sounds really cool. And there's artifact weapons, right? So, Shaman wants to be well, if I'm a Demon Hunter, I can't get Doomhammer now.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm honestly considering re-rolling to my Druid for the next expansion because, they haven't outwardly said that the Druid class area will be in Moonglade, but I would much rather hang out in Moonglade than in a stupid cave.
Yeah, well, we haven't seen the cave yet, but I'm in a basement. I am living in the basement.
What happened to us, Perk? We have been banished to the caves and the basements. What has happened to us? It's so, so upsetting. But I think it's about time for us to wrap it up. What do you think?
Yeah. I'm going to wrap it up, and I don't know if I can go back to sleep, but I will probably work on a general Legion guide, putting together all the information we've gotten from the interviews and everything. Since our show on Friday, I wrote a guide to artifacts, and I pulled together all the pictures we have of all the known ones. We had our regular show, which is up on the site. We have the interviews recap. We have costume contest picks. We have our Demon Hunter guide and a few other things.
Oh, I loved the winner of the costume contest. Just side note, she was freaking adorable.
I think our stream just died too.
Yeah, that's okay. We're ending it anyways.
Yep.
And the VOD
Thanks,
will
Twitch.
be up. So if you're watching the VOD and you were watching the stream, I'm sorry that it died. It was Twitch. It wasn't us. I'm still streaming on my end. And it says 13. Oh my god, right now, when our stream died, 1337 viewers.
That is awesome.
You killed it because you're too awesome. Actually, I don't know what happened. The reason our stream just died is because we got 400 viewers at once. That's what just happened. Like, it just jumped from 1337 to 1729. Now it's down to 619. I have no idea. Twitch is dead. RIP Twitch. We're gonna go. We stream Wowhead weekly every Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We talk about everything that's going on in World of Warcraft and Blizzard and Wowhead and all of that good stuff. You can always catch the VOD on YouTube. Thank you to everybody who subscribes to our Twitch channel. You get some really cute emotes to use on any Twitch channel on all of the Twitch universe. And thank you to anybody who subscribes to Wowhead Weekly, which not only removes ads from your browser experience, but it also helps out the show and gives you a bunch of special perks on the site. We're gonna go, not that perk.
Yep.
Not that perk.
Yep.
Other perks. We're gonna go. We hope you're all having a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.